Hello, college fantasy football friends and family. You're watching the Week 7 show. My name is Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the CFF site, and I'll be your host as always. This week, we've got a condensed show. I'm going to skip over the 4-1 Super Fantasy League for time constraints. However, let's talk about that Week 7 slate. Tennessee, Ole Miss. Will they be able to stop one another? You're looking at a total of 80 points. Will Malik Willis finally put up a really big game for his fantasy owners through his first interception of the year last week and threw 3 of them? Western Kentucky, will they be able to run the table from here? Bailey Zappi looks like a guarantee for 400 yards and 3 to 4 touchdowns every week. And of course, we're not going to skip over what's going on at Oklahoma. Caleb Williams, will he get the start this week for Oklahoma? That remains to be seen. I have my take on that, and we'll get into that and a lot more on this week's show. First of all, let me just say this, due to time constraints, I'm not going to get a lot into the 4-1 Super Fantasy League this week. I'll give you guys shouts out next week. Working on a condensed schedule this week. I'm recording this. I'm in the studio late Wednesday night right now. All of you all that may have visited the site early this evening may have realized that the top 10's already posted. The Week 7 projections are already live and posted. Mike's DFS write-ups are already posted on the site. So we've got a lot up early for you guys this week, but I'm in the studio late getting this podcast because I always like to have it uploaded for Thursday morning, but it is late and I don't, I do want to run through the Week 7 schedule because it's going to take us a little bit of time, as it always does. So, we're going to jump right into it and not waste a lot of time, right? Because Navy, we've got 2 games Friday night. We've got Navy playing at Memphis. And for me, it's all about what's happening over at running back with Memphis. Last week, we saw the re-emergence of Brandon Thomas as the Tigers' top back. You would expect, hopefully, that the fumbling issues are a thing of the past and that he will keep that job and should be a solid play from here on out. Obviously, Calvin Austin, a must-play wide receiver 1. South Alabama hosting Georgia Southern in the second Friday night game. All of you guys out there that have Jalen Tolbert on your roster, obviously a lot of you all spent an early pick on him. It was nice to see him find the end zone for the first time last week, and we're hoping that he can duplicate that with another performance, maybe back-to-back weeks of finding the end zone. That is the hope, at least. And I think the matchup looks good for Tolbert and the South Alabama passing game. The question with South Alabama, what's going on with running back? Obviously, we had Kareem Walker go down a couple of weeks ago. Will he return? Are they still going to shuffle a couple of guys in there? That remains to be seen. So I'd be careful at the running back spot for South Alabama this week unless we get some clarity going into the weekend. And speaking of the weekend, Saturday's games, Clemson playing at Syracuse. We know what we're going to get out of the Syracuse offense. Will they be able to move the ball against the Clemson defense? That's really going to be the question. Will Sean Tucker, Garrett Schrader be able to do their 1-2 thing on the ground against that Clemson defense? I'm not overly optimistic about that matchup, but I think if you have Sean Tucker, he gets fed the ball so much, it's hard to stay away from him. And then, of course, when it comes to the Clemson offense, really, they've been sort of, mysterious this year would probably be, a good word to use. We just don't know what to expect. Will we get another solid performance from Kobe Pace at the running back spot? You're going to be starting your Clemson players. You're going to have to really take a look at your matchups and, maybe your depth. Maybe you're sitting, some buys, some injuries, and you have to start a Pace, or maybe you have to start a Justin Ross. But you're going to have to weigh your options with that Clemson offense because they just aren't giving us that must-start player week in and week out this year. Marshall playing on the road at North Texas. I'm still going to be careful a little bit with North Texas. They did throw up 3 touchdowns in the last 9 minutes on the road at Missouri last week. Still don't have a lot of confidence in that offense, but if you have DeAndre Torrey, you certainly have to roll with him. And then obviously over at Marshall for another week, you're looking at running back Rasheen Ali. He's one of our top running backs this week, if not sitting in that top spot going into the weekend. Last week was the first week that he did not score a touchdown. So maybe we jinxed him, putting him in the top 5. But the guy's got 3. I believe he's got 4 multi-touchdown games already this year. So I think going up against that North Texas defense. Considering what Tyler Beatty for Missouri did last week, you have to feel really good about Rasheen Ali this week on the road at North Texas. San Diego State at San Jose State. Greg Bell came back, basically proved that he really wasn't injured that much. Came out of that game from Townsend against Townsend with a slight nick. My argument was that they probably just didn't want to take a chance, and at this, they probably just erred on the side of caution, took him out of that matchup. He came back last week, 100 yards. And San Diego State 5-0 going on the road against San Jose State. That for me just doesn't look like the San Jose State team from last year. Greg Bell, a must start in that spot. Cal playing on the road at Oregon. And this is where we start getting into some of the good conversations, right? Because CJ Verdell, we're not going to see him again. And it's all about Travis Dye and really him becoming that running back one for the Ducks. Here's what we don't know. How are they going to incorporate a second running back into the backfield behind Dye? Because really that's what's unknown right now. It's unproven. So, you're looking at guys like Byron Cardwell and Seven McGee, right? And so either of those two guys right now, I would think are going to be the leading candidates to emerge at that running back 2 spot behind Dye. But until we see it, I think you really have to like Dye this week, particularly in that starter's role, knowing that he's not going to split carries for CJ Verdell. Definitely a must start this week. Texas A&M going on the road, playing Missouri. This is where I would say, hey, maybe there's a little bit of a letdown here on the road. SEC game, big win at home, upset against Alabama. But with the way that Missouri's given up, the way that Missouri defense has given up chunks of yards on the ground, you really have to like the way that Texas A&M is playing. You have to like Spiller. You have to like a Shane. That 1-2 punch on the ground, I think, is really going to grind it out. And I have to tell you, I was really improved. I was really impressed last week by Zach Calzada, for the quarterback for Texas A&M. He has gotten progressively better week after week after week. The first start completed less than 50% of his passes. The next 2 games, he was around 55, 57%. The last 2 games, he's either been at 60 and against Alabama, 67. So he looks like his confidence is growing, and that that A&M offense is actually improving the more playing time that he gets. Big win at home against Alabama, but I do think that they ride the running game this week in that road tilt against Missouri. I think the question is how much confidence do you have in Tyler Beatty? Here's what I suggest. I think you have to roll with Beatty. I think he's going to get a heavy dose. If not, he may get a heavy dose, but I don't really expect him to rack up the yards on the ground. It only needs to break 1. But remember, he's also a dual threat running back as well. He's capable of giving you 3 to 5 catches out of the backfield and possibly another 30, 40, 60 yards through the air. So even though he might have tough sledding against the A&M defense and may not get over that 80-yard mark, there's still a chance for him to total over 100 yards and find the end zone, because he has a chance to do it as a receiver out of the backfield. Michigan State playing on the road at Indiana. Can Kenneth Walker III continue his hot start can he continue that into the middle of the season? An absolute must start at this time of the year for Michigan State in an offense like A&M, their offense seems to be getting more confident as the year wears on. Nebraska playing on the road at Minnesota. What we've seen is what we've gotten out of Nebraska. We know what we're going to get there. We're not sure what we're going to get from that Minnesota offense right now, with Potts obviously on the shelf. Is it going to be Marquise Irving at the running back spot? That's what remains. And really, even if it is him, if Irving takes over as the top spot, will we continue to see Minnesota feed the running back 20, 25 times? They're getting thin now, right? So here's the question. Last week, last game for Minnesota, we saw Cole Kramer come in there. He had 8 carries, 32 yards. Against Bowling Green, he had 2 for 22 and scored a touchdown. Will we see Minnesota incorporate more of Kramer into the running game as well to make sure that to ensure that their depth holds up over the course of the season? I do think that that's something we need to pay attention to. And given that Minnesota has had some time now to prepare, I wouldn't even be surprised if somebody like Chris Autman-Bell has a big game this week. Maybe this is the week where they try to jumpstart the passing game a little bit, get things going against Nebraska. Remember, Minnesota is at home this weekend. And so that's what I'm looking for out of Minnesota. Will they ride Irving? Will they get Kramer some carries? And will they put the ball in the air a little bit more and maybe utilize Chris Autman-Bell in that passing game a little bit more this week? Rutgers playing at Northwestern. Really no significant players, in my opinion, in that matchup right there. And it remains to to be seen whether or not Bo Melton will return for Rutgers. To me, he's the player that I'd want to target in this. Of course, you've got Pacheco and Hall, the two running backs in this matchup. But it's sort of a stay away matchup for me, depending on what type of league that you play in. Auburn playing on the road at Arkansas. Arkansas had hung up a ton of points last week against Ole Miss. I don't think we see that type of game this week at home against Auburn. I think you're going to see a little bit more of a defensive game. And I do think that you're okay if you want to start KJ Jefferson. Obviously, you got Treylon Burks. I think he's still a must start, even though this is the type of matchup for me where I'm a little worried about him, where maybe he only catches 3 passes and doesn't hit for that big one. But we'll see. He's a must start. You've got to play him. The guy's just simply too good. Florida on the road at LSU, that LSU offense losing Kayshon Boutte, who establishes themselves as the new wide receiver 1. If I were to take a guess, I don't think we're going to really see a true wide receiver 1. I could be wrong on that. I think you're going to see LSU having to spread it around a little bit more. The question is whether they're going to use Davis Price a little bit more in the running game after that 100-yard game that he had last week against Kentucky. He ran for 147 and 2 scores. Maybe LSU tries to grind it out a little, tries to, take the air out of the ball a little bit and utilize that running game. But tough matchup at home going up against Florida. Emory Jones playing really well as of late. And I think Florida's not going to have many issues playing on the road at LSU. And, something that was, we were a little, doubtful about early on in the year after seeing Anthony Richardson get some time and really break off some big plays. It seems like Emory Jones has settled into that quarterback spot, and it seems like the offense is certainly I don't want to say humming along, but they're doing well, and he's playing pretty good too compared to what he was playing at the beginning of the year. And we might not see Anthony Richardson for a little while now, and maybe they're trying to come up with some wrinkles for when Florida plays Georgia. But on the road at LSU, you have to decide whether or not it's worth playing your Florida players. And there aren't many in there, but obviously, Emory Jones is going to be in there, whether or not you're going to go with any of the running backs like Wright or Pierce. The one interesting thing is that Pierce has got 3 double-digit touchdowns this year already. So he is a guy that if you play in a Power 5 league, maybe SEC only, you're definitely playing him this week. Oklahoma State playing on the road at Texas. That's another 11 o'clock kickoff. Obviously, Texas with that game against Oklahoma last week blew a lead. Oklahoma came back, won that game. This is I know, I was a person that really liked Xavier Worthy at the beginning of the year. I just didn't see where the Longhorns had a more talented receiver on their roster than Worthy. But I also, worry that maybe just like 2 games ago, where Worthy just goes and catches one ball. I think Oklahoma State's defense is pretty darn good. And I think they're going to give Bijan Robinson a tough time, even though I've got Bijan ranked in the top 10. I think he's going to have to grind it out this week. And, this is one of those games where maybe Worthy is boom or bust. Now, the one thing that will help Worthy out in Joshua Moore is that Jordan Whittington is down. He won't be playing in this game. So that will increase or should increase the targets that a player like Worthy gets. But I really like that Oklahoma State defense, and I think they've got a shot to win this game on the road. And I think Jaylen Warren and Tay Martin are must starts for that Oklahoma State offense. Central Florida, nothing really to brag about since they lost Dylan Gabriel. And so I think this is a matchup where I think you go with Ford, and I think Desmond Ridder has a nice matchup this week too. And the question is, will they turn him loose a little bit? I always find that, I think Cincinnati's playing the long haul on this one. They know they need Ridder healthy. They need Ford healthy as well, but Ridder is the most important piece of that team. And if they lose him, they're done. And so I find that the easier the opponent, the less likely they are to utilize Cincinnati. Can Central Florida give Cincinnati a game, and will they let loose Desmond Ridder? That remains to be seen. But the passing game is improving for Cincinnati, and I think you've got to like Ridder's chances to account for at least 3, maybe 4 touchdowns in this game. Yale playing at home against Connecticut. Nice to see. It would be nice to see the Huskies get a win, but going up against 2-2 Yale, I don't even think that that's a given this week. Poor Huskies. Ohio playing on the road at Buffalo. Quinn Williams is having a really good year for Buffalo. He's only found the end zone one time, though. I think you guys playing in PPR leagues, though, he's definitely a must start. And over at Ohio, Demontre Tuggle now seems to have kind of reestablished himself at that running back 1 spot, but doing so in tandem with Amani Rodgers at quarterback, where they seem to have gotten back a little bit more to their run-heavy roots. So we'll see how that one plays out. Tulsa playing on the road at South Florida. And for me, it's really just we went into the season with Tulsa having, this group of receivers, and it was like, they could spread it out. You've got Stokes, you got Johnson, Santana, you got a bunch of receivers there, but Josh Johnson has really, really separated himself from the pack. 3 100-yard games in his last 4 outings, 2 touchdowns in those outings. And I think this is a matchup this week at South Florida where I think we've got Johnson. I think I've got him ranked up there somewhere in the top 15, maybe even near the top 10. Certainly a good play this week. Duke playing on the road at Virginia, 2 teams that have had trouble playing defense. I think that bodes well for Mateo Durant, the running back for Duke, who's a must start. Virginia as well, Brennan Armstrong, the pieces of the passing game. And I think you've got pieces of the Duke passing game as well. It'd be nice. This is a total of 70 points right here. Possible game where both teams break 30. We'll see how this plays out, but I think you've really got to consider your Duke players. If you have any, particularly, maybe the receivers there. I think it's Calhoun and maybe Bobo are the 2 guys you've got to look at to get in this matchup as well for Duke. When you look at Calhoun, he's gone over 100 yards in back-to-back games. Jake Bobo, 2 100-yard games in his, 2 of his last 4. He's gone over 88 yards in 5 of 6 games and found the end zone for the first time last week. So I think even Gunnar Holmberg, the quarterback, going against that Virginia defense, if you need a quarterback this week and you're stuck and you've got a player like that out there on the waiver wire because you're battling injuries, you're battling bye weeks, you could do a lot worse. And this would be the matchup to pick up a player like him. Ball State seems to have gotten things back on the rails again after a really sluggish and so slow start, a 1-3 start. Back-to-back wins against Army and an impressive win on the road against Western Michigan. I like where things stand for Ball State right now. Justin Hall should be fine. I think he's a must-start this week. And Johannes Tyler getting himself jump-started as well. Maybe a guy that's out there on the waiver wire that was drafted in a lot of leagues. Very slow start. I think he's scored, and I think he's caught a touchdown pass in back-to-back weeks, and I think you've got to take him, give him some serious consideration as well. Miami of Ohio hosting Akron this week. And I think when you look at Miami of Ohio, you've got to take a look at the passing game in this matchup, particularly Jake Sorensen and maybe even Mac Hippenhammer, who has gone over 90 yards in each of his last 2 games. Wow, feels like I can't talk tonight. And then all of a sudden, Jake Sorensen, you're looking at him. He's caught, at least 5 passes in 4 of the last 5. Went over 100 yards for the first time last week. He's caught a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games, really on a roll right now. And I think you got to take a look at those 2 guys if you're in a deep, full FBS league. Troy playing on the road at Texas State. The one thing that I mentioned in my news and notes over the weekend was that Gunnar Watson finds himself now the starter once again at Troy. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but you have to realize that last week, Reggie Todd, who was one of their better receivers statistically last year, had his best fantasy game of the season with Watson at quarterback, caught his first touchdown of the season, had 4 catches for 71 yards. That was his second highest game total this year 4 catches, 71 yards, and a touchdown. And I think you've got to keep eyes on him as long as Gunnar Watson remains the quarterback. What's really more at question is what's going on at running back at Troy. And I think you have to stay away. Kamani Vidal missed 2 games ago, and BJ Smith carried the load and led the team in rushing. I think he went over 100 yards. Last week, BJ Smith went out. Both of those plays were, Vidal 2 weeks ago. It wasn't announced before game. It wasn't announced, I don't think, before the game last week that Smith wasn't going to play. Vidal led the team in carries, and Jamontez Woods led the team with 98 yards and a touchdown. So I think right now you really have to stay away from the Troy running game. And really with Georgia Southern, that's what they're known for, their running game, but nothing consistent is coming out of Georgia Southern right now. So I think you really have to shy away from that matchup. Oh, I'm sorry. Troy's playing at Texas State. I mentioned they played Georgia Southern last week, but they play at Texas State. So I apologize for that. And with Texas State, I do think you've got to take a look at Marcel Barbie, who isn't really tearing up in regards to the yards, but he is back to scoring touchdowns again. Remember, he was good for scoring touchdowns last year. When you look at the schedule this year, Barbie has what? He scored 3 touchdowns in the 5 games this year. His single game high is only 67 yards, but as long as he's finding the end zone, he's worth a start. And I think more of a flex option in sort of deep leagues, maybe a wide receiver 3 in full FBS leagues. But I still think you've got to give him some starting consideration as well. Miami playing on the road at North Carolina. Josh Downs, obviously, Sam Howell, must starts. Let's see what Miami does at quarter. Well, we know what they're going to do at quarterback, but De'Ara King now out for the year, so it's going to be Van Dyke's team. I'm more curious to see what Miami does at running back, though, because when Jalen Knighton was suspended for the first 4 games of the year. He came back last week, and it looked like they were ready to just feed him the rock in his first game back, and he just wasn't as productive as Cameron Harris was. I'm curious to see what they do this week. Are they still going to try to ignite that run game with Knighton, or will they just use old reliable right now, Cam Harris, and maybe split the carries? Remains to be seen. But in my eyes, it looks like they want to pass the torch to Knighton. Let's see if that happens in this game against North Carolina. Pitt playing on the road at Virginia Tech this week, and right now that Pitt offense cannot be stopped. Kenny Pickett has just been incredible. His numbers have just been crazy good over the course of this season. When you look at Pickett's numbers, he's thrown at least 4 touchdowns in each of the last 3 games. Crazy pinball numbers, over 380 passing. Nothing like Zappy from Western Kentucky, but good numbers. And here's what I'll say this week. This is where I think I'm a little cautious about Pitt and Kenny Pickett. Not that he's not going to play well, and not that he's not going to post big numbers, but they play on the road at Virginia Tech this week. And when I look at the Pitt schedule, they opened up with UMass. They beat Tennessee on the road when Tennessee didn't really look like the Tennessee of today, of like week 6. It was Tennessee week 2 when they were still trying to figure out what they were doing at quarterback. Pitt lost to Western Michigan 44-41. Western Michigan hasn't looked great, but Pitt did score points. They put up 77 up against New Hampshire, and then they played at Georgia Tech and put up 52. They go at Virginia Tech. They get Clemson at home in Miami. I happen to think this is going to be the 3-game run right here where maybe Pitt hits a little bit of a bump in the road. What remains to be seen is how big that bump is. And for right now, I don't see how you sit Pickett, and you certainly aren't sitting Jordan Addison, and maybe Kroll, the tight end. You've got to get him in there as well. I'm not trying to scare anyone off Kenny Pickett in that Pitt offense. What I'm trying to say is the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'm not expecting what I saw the first 5 games of the year. However, if they come out of this 3-game set unscathed, the schedule to end the year looks crazy good. At Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, at Syracuse. That's a great schedule for Pitt. And right now, with the way their schedule sets up, at Virginia Tech, Clemson at home, and Miami. I mean, look, Clemson's not even scary this year. So, like I said, not trying to scare anyone off of Pitt, but when I look at their schedule, the next 3 weeks is where I see the biggest roadblock. And after that, I think you're home free with your Pitt players. And I think this could be a game you really want a sleeper for this week. I think you've really got to look at this matchup with Virginia Tech and Pitt and say, okay, if Pitt's going to go ahead and put some points on the board, you have to think Virginia Tech's going to have to keep up with them. If Burmeister plays, all of a sudden, I think you could look at a player like Trey Turner. I think could be a sleeper in this matchup. Maybe he's a guy you go out and get if he's not on a roster, if you need a 1 week wide receiver, because Virginia Tech's going to have to find ways to keep up with Pitt on the scoreboard. And maybe it is through Turner in that passing game. Arizona playing on the road at Colorado, a game that really just doesn't interest me at all. I know a lot of you guys probably with Stanley Berryhill. I think you do have to give him some consideration this week, but also remember Jordan McLeod is lost for the season, so it remains to be seen who they will turn to at quarterback at Arizona. It may have been released. Like I said, I haven't checked out any of the news today, but of course we'll update the projections over the next 24, 48 hours as we get the news on whether or not some starters are named or some injured players this week come back and play. Purdue on the road at Iowa. And, the question for me with Iowa is, do they win that game last week if Penn State wouldn't have lost their quarterback, right? And I think for me, that's the ultimate question. Still, I think that Iowa's really good. And I still think that Iowa defense is really solid. A lot of questions coming in. What about David Bell this week against that Iowa defense? The only thing that I will tell you guys is that maybe Iowa is a little bit better this year than they have been in years past, but Iowa's defense, comparative to the Purdue offense, has always been pretty darn good. And David Bell has caught 13 passes against the Hawkeyes in each of the last 2 years. And so for you guys looking to sit David Bell because he's going up against that Iowa defense, he's gone against that Iowa defense now. This will be his third time. And each of the last 2 times in 2019 and 2020, he has caught at least 13 he's caught 13 passes in each of those games. Northern Illinois hosting Bowling Green this week. And I think really just the big question is Harrison Whaley going to be healthy? And if not, then Ontario Brown is a must start this week. If Whaley is healthy, that throws a monkey wrench into the situation because we just don't know how healthy he'll be. And will we see a split backfield when he comes back? I think you're probably safer if you own Brown and Whaley doesn't play than if you're holding on to Whaley right now and he does play. Because the question is, if he does come back, how healthy will he be? Will he be 100% healthy? Will they risk bringing him back if he's not completely healthy? And I think that I would be nervous to start him even if I heard that Whaley was going to be back this week, particularly considering the fact that this is a MAC matchup. And the one thing about these MAC teams is that we just don't get the news, the notes, the blurbs, the Twitter feeds, the message board, coverage from these MAC schools as we do for a lot of other teams. MAC information is incredibly difficult to come by, and I think you really need to err on the side of caution with this one. Toledo playing on the road at Central Michigan. Bryant Koback, obviously obviously the running back there. Lou Nichols, you've got Dallas Dixon. The question is, will we see Ja'Cory Sullivan back this week for Central Michigan? And really what happens there at quarterback with Toledo? Will we see DeQuan Finn? And if so, will we see him vulture some carries away from Bryant Koback? So I think that situation needs to be monitored, but I do think that Koback is a must play in this matchup for sure. Kent State playing on the road at Western Michigan. Last week, Dustin Crum accounted for 5 touchdowns. He accounted for 5 touchdowns in the first 4 games of the season. First 5 games of the season, he accounted for 5 total touchdowns. He matched that total last week. I do think that Kent State keeps things going. Dante Cephas in the passing game. I wouldn't expect last week's numbers, but we know that Western Michigan put up points too, and this might be one of those MAC games. We've got a total of 66 points for this game where we see both teams get over the 30-point mark. And so I do think you've got to get, Ladarius Jefferson. You've got to get, whether or not you're going to start Caleb Ellaby. I think you got to weigh out your options on your roster and your depth for that. But obviously, we've got Skye Moore as well. Skye Moore caught 7 passes last week, 81 yards. He's gone over at 95 yards in 3 of the last 4. He's caught at least 9 at least 7 passes in each of the last 4 games, and at least 9 in 3 of the last 4. For me, he's a must start, especially in leagues that are full point PPR. Kentucky playing on the road at Georgia. Sorry, but Chris Rodriguez owners, this one scares me. On the road at Georgia, this is where I'd be looking to bench all of my Kentucky players this week, and I'd only do it if I were in a pinch. And look, I think as long as Georgia is playing a decent defense, Zamir White is a must start. He's had 2 good games in a row against 2 decent matchups that the Bulldogs have had against Arkansas and Auburn. I say decent. They ended up being blowouts, but games that they were going to have to rely on Zamir White a little bit. And Zamir White's responded. I think he's gone for 2 touchdowns in back-to-back games. So I think this could, he's scored in 4 straight. He's not gotten over the 80-yard mark, but he has scored in 4 straight and has scored 2 touchdowns in back-to-back games. And I think this matchup, home against Kentucky and on the road at Florida, really is good for Zamir White. I think where you've got to worry about Zamir White is after they get past that Florida game, in 3 weeks, because they go Kentucky, bye, and then at Florida. Then they get Missouri at home. That's a game that they're not going to have any problems with. They're probably not going to have to lean on him. They go to Tennessee. They get Charleston Southern. They go to Georgia Tech. I have to be honest with you. I'm probably looking at Zamir White this week when I look at the schedule for Georgia and say, man, I'd love for him to have a couple of touchdowns this week. That gives him 3 weeks with double-digit scores. His stock's never going to be higher this year. You're going to be faced with a bye week and then a game against Florida, which I do think he'll do well against Florida. They're going to need him in that matchup, but you've got a bye week sandwich between the Kentucky game and the Florida game. And then you've got Missouri at Tennessee, Charleston Southern at Georgia Tech, games that they're not going to have any problems with. And I think that's where, if you're Georgia, you start making sure once when you get past the Florida game that you start to stay healthy. And I think what you're hoping for as a Zamir White owner this week is that he finds the end zone twice. And you say, hey, I'm dangling him out there like a carrot. You've got a guy that has scored 6 touchdowns in the previous 3 weeks. He's hot. And then you go ahead and dangle him out there like a carrot to, some owner in your league that thinks he's going to, he's got a hot running back. But that's what I would be doing with Zamir White right now. I'd ride him this week, hope that he does well. Then I'd dangle him out there like a carrot in a trade and try to bolster your roster for the playoff run, because I just don't think Georgia's going to need him much once when they get past Florida on October 30th. BYU playing on the road at Baylor. BYU stunk it up against Boise State. I think this is a game that Baylor could control as well. If Boise State controlled BYU, I think Baylor can control them as well. I do think you still have to start Tyler Algier. And then I think over on the Baylor side, you've got Thornton over there at receiver. He's coming off a 2-touchdown game. He has scored. He's got 2 multiple touchdown games. He has scored 3 in his last 5, went over the 100-yard mark for the second time this year last week in that 45-20 win against West Virginia. I think you've got to look at Abram Smith. I think he may get a little bit more of workload this week. Him and Ebner forming that 1-2 punch. But really, Jerry Bohannon as well. 300-yard passing game last week, 4 touchdowns. And I think the one thing that you've got to, even though I'm not expecting another 4 TD pass game, 4 passing TDs this week against BYU, you have to remember he has scored a rushing touchdown now in 5 consecutive games. He's only got 36 yards as a season high, but if you can get 30 yards in a touchdown on top of a couple of passing touchdowns and maybe a 225-yard performance in the air, from me, particularly in 2 quarterback leagues, you've got to consider Jerry Bohannon as a start this week for college fantasy football. Fresno State playing on the road at Wyoming. It'll be interesting to see if Fresno State regrouped after that loss to Hawaii. I have to tell you, I watched that game and I was not overly impressed with the Fresno State offense. They did not look anything like what they looked earlier in the year. They just looked off. It'd be interesting to see if they can get the train back on the tracks and Jalen Cropper can really, explode in this matchup against that Wyoming secondary. I think whenever you've got a game in Laramie, I think it's tough sledding, particularly if Wyoming can start moving the ball a little bit, because they'll control tempo, they'll control the clock, and limit that Fresno State offense in a number of possessions and a couple of 3 and outs. And next thing you know, Wyoming's got the ball for 12 or 15 minutes of a quarter and may be able to wear the Bulldogs down. I think the thing that makes this an interesting matchup is that the game is in Wyoming, but I do think that Jake Haener, Jalen Cropper, and that depth that what they have at receiver for Fresno State is going to be too much for Wyoming to overcome. I think the only way Fresno State loses this game is if Fresno State shoots themselves in the foot. And I think you've got to start some of your Fresno starters, which there are a bunch. I know there's a lot of Fresno players on rosters, but for me, the must starts are Jake Haener and Jalen Cropper. And then from there, you've got to weigh out your options on whether you're starting Kelly, where you're starting Wheatfall, whether you're starting Ronnie Rivers. Those are the guys you've really got to, weigh out your options. And also, even if you want to sleeper play on the Wyoming side, let's play devil's advocate. Let's put the shoe on the other foot, right? Let's just say Wyoming does fall behind Fresno State and Fresno State races out to, a quick 17, 21 point lead. I think all of a sudden now that brings in a player like Isaiah Nair into the conversation, wide receiver for Wyoming. He has caught 3 touchdowns. He's caught a touchdown in 3 of the last 4, and he's gone over the 80-yard mark in 2 of the last 4. And I think he's the guy that if they have to throw the ball, they're going to need something. So a lot of you guys light at receiver this week playing in deep leagues might not be a bad sleeper option when it comes to flex or a wide receiver 3 or 4. UAB playing on the road at Southern Miss, a game that I'm not expecting the Blazers to have trouble with. UAB, one of the top defensive plays this week, in my opinion. Western Kentucky playing on the road at Old Dominion. I happen to think this point spread looks really, really funny to me, because I do think for how well Western Kentucky's offense has looked, I do think that their defense has looked just as, has looked as suspect as good as their offense has looked. And I do think there's a chance that Old Dominion might be able to just kind of hang around in this game. And that's interesting, because if you have Bailey Zappi in that Western Kentucky offense, that's what you really want to happen. 500 yards and 4 touchdowns almost seems like a given for Zappi in this game. And I'm not even going to list, because all the receivers that you have that are probably on rosters right now are must plays. Texas Tech playing on the road at Kansas. So Roderick Thompson was one of our, top plays last week at running back, came through for a lot of you guys. Real interesting to see if a player like Devin Neal, running back Kansas, could be a nice sleeper option for some of you guys. I think he has potential to go over 100 yards in this matchup against Texas Tech. Vanderbilt playing on the road at South Carolina. And if you're still holding on to Kevin Harris, this is probably going to be one of the better matchups, if not the best matchup that's remaining on the schedule. You've got Vanderbilt at home. They go to A&M. They get Florida at home after a bye, and then they go at Missouri before getting Auburn and Clemson. So if you, like I think I might have said this a couple of games ago, I think you're really looking for Kevin Harris to break out. And then much like with Zamir White, that I mentioned a few minutes earlier, you look to dangle him out there and see if you can get any trade bait for him. Because if you're not able to get anything for him, he's really tying up a roster spot. And if you're deep, you're really probably holding him for that one matchup against Missouri on November 13th. And after that, I don't know how Kevin Harris becomes an option for you. So I think you really want him to have a good game this week, go over 100 yards, touchdown, see if you could dangle him out, work him into some trades, because really, I don't think you're going to start him but one more time for the rest of the year. And really, that's it. And that's my take on South Carolina. Just they happen to play Vanderbilt this week, and it's a good matchup. UTSA playing at home against Rice this week. If you would have told me last week that UTSA was going to score, 7 touchdowns, and all of them were going to be passing, and that Sincere McCormick was not going to have a touchdown, I would have said, no way that's going to possibly happen. Like, how did that not happen, right? McCormick, I think he went over 140 total yards of offense. But Frank Harris, let's see. Sincere McCormick, 142 total yards of offense. No TDs. Frank Harris sets the school record for, I think, 6 passing touchdowns and accounted for 7 because he caught the other touchdown pass from a wide receiver. So just an absolute record-breaking day for Frank Harris against that Western Kentucky team. And I think there's going to be a lot of teams setting single game records going up against that Western Kentucky defense. Utah State playing on the road at UNLV. Devin Tompkins, one of the top receivers this week. I think this is a good matchup for the Utah State offense. And I also think this is a good matchup if you have Charles Williams, for UNLV running back, or if he's out there and, you need a running back this week because you're in a pinch and you're looking, obviously UNLV has started off kind of slow. When you look at the UNLV schedule, they lose by 2 to Eastern Washington. They lose at Arizona State. No shame in that. They lose at home to Iowa State. No shame in that. Both of those defenses are pretty good. They played Fresno State tough. Had a chance to really beat Fresno State, put up 30 points, and then they only lose to 7 at UTSA. They get Utah State at home, and I'm telling you, for as much as a mismatch this game might be, UNLV might actually have a shot to do something in this game, and I think Charles Williams will be valuable and a valuable fantasy commodity this weekend in that home matchup against Utah State. Alabama playing on the road at Mississippi State. Does Alabama's offense get back on the track after that disappointing loss to Texas A&M last week, and will they continue to ride Brian Robinson? And I think as long as you have him, you've got to get him in the lineup. I mean, look, I'm not saying sit any other players. I mean, you've got Young, you've got Mechie, you've got Williams, you've got Latu, you've got Billy, you've got options all over on that Alabama offense. But Mississippi State, start with caution, right? I think, even if you're considering a guy like Mekhi Polk or any other Mississippi State player, I almost feel like your hands are tied a little bit in the fact that you probably need to be playing in a full point PPR league to consider starting a Mississippi State offensive player this week because, could Polk catch 10 passes this week? Sure. If you're playing in a half point PPR league, that's only 5 points. He may not rack up yards. He may not find the end zone. So I think unless you're playing in a full point PPR league, you've got to really can weigh out your options as far as the receivers and the running backs from Mississippi State. Colorado State playing on the road at New Mexico. David Bailey yet to return and play. And I think if you're out there and need a 1 week pickup, if we know that David Bailey isn't going to come back, I think you've got to look at a player like a Jean Vivens, who had over 100 yards last week, 31 carries. So, he was a player last week that they, used a lot at running back. And with Bailey out, they certainly leaned on him against San Jose State, so much so that they gave him 31 carries. And I think if Bailey's out, Vivens would be a nice play for this week for you guys as well. Liberty playing on the road at Louisiana Monroe. And I mentioned this when we opened up the show. I mentioned last week how Liberty was really getting into a stretch of their schedule where I thought Malik Willis was just ready to explode. Well, he threw his first interception last week against Middle Tennessee. And not only did he throw 1, he threw 2, and then he threw his third. I think he gets things going this week on the road at UL Monroe. I'm certainly hope so. We've got him up there, one of the top quarterbacks again going into week 7. NC State playing on the road at Boston College. I do like that 1-2 punch of Person and Zonovan Knight for NC State. And I think Pat Garwo, it'd be interesting to see if BC can get some things going on the ground. He'd probably be the player other than Barry at tight end that I would consider starting in this matchup, BC at home. Iowa State playing on the road at Kansas State. As far as Kansas State goes, it's Deuce Vaughn a bust for me in regards to fantasy options in that offense. And then with, you've got Breece Hall. He's got a consecutive game streak going of at least 2 scores. And I think you've got to look at guys like Xavier Hutchinson as well, Charlie Kolar at tight end. Stanford playing at Washington State. Stanford really getting things going through the air this year, almost looks different than what we've known from a David Shaw offense, where we're used to seeing Stanford run the ball. Now we're seeing Stanford take to the air. And I think, Elijah Higgins coming off of a 100-yard game last week, he's gone over 100 in 2 of his last 3. He's scored in 3 consecutive games. He has scored now in 4 of his last 5, and going up and playing Washington State at Washington State this week. We've got him as one of the top, I think, 12 receivers on our projections this week. Ole Miss playing at Tennessee. I mentioned this, in the opening. Are these teams going to be able to stop one another? 82-point total that is up to. That's 40 plus on each side, approximately. I just don't know if this game's going to get there for you fantasy guys. Even if it gets close, you're going to be loving this game. Big questions is, Jerry and Ely, will we see him back? I think he's likely to return this week. So we'll, be curious to see what happens there. A lot of questions coming in too about Drummond, how his production is kind of tailed off. You've got to realize Ole Miss has played Arkansas, which has a pretty good defense, and they've played Alabama. I think this matchup plays into the hands of the offenses, and I think you'll see Drummond get back to where he was around that 100-yard mark and find the end zone in this matchup against Tennessee. Hendon Hooker's been, him and Corral going to duel it out most likely through the air and both a threat on the ground. Ole Miss has the running game going now too. Tennessee's got the passing game going now too. This one's, I think, is just going to be fun to watch. Not much in regards to standings, I think, are really going to matter in this one, ultimately in the SEC race. But it's going to be fun tuning into this one just for all the fantasy potential. Hopefully we don't get a dud and get a letdown in this game, because there are options all over the field. And what's funny is we go into the flip side of that, right? Army playing on the road at Wisconsin, two offenses that are probably just going to pound it out. 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We'll see what Wisconsin will do. Big news coming out of Wisconsin this week. Jalen Berger no longer with the program. I think he might actually have entered the transfer portal already. But Braylon Allen, coming off of a 131-yard game against Illinois in a touchdown, really have to like the prospects of him becoming Wisconsin's number one running back going into next year. And really, it's going to be him and Malisi, the 1-2 punch going into the end of the year, going into the home stretch for Wisconsin. And let's see if he can really, if Allen really can establish himself as a true running back one, or will they kind of, will they give him that, or will we see more of a split? I do think it's still going to be tough now, even though we're talking about one less, we're talking about Berger out of the equation. I still think, they played Illinois last week. I'm not expecting this Wisconsin offense to run the ball with ease like they did against Illinois. I do think Army does offer a little bit of a stiffer test on the ground, and I'm curious to see what the Badgers can put together in back-to-back weeks before I start riding that Wisconsin running back again. So I'm kind of curious to see how things play out this week. UCLA playing on the road at Washington. Washington should get Richard Newton back this week. How will that affect Sean McGrew? I think McGrew sticks as the running back one, but will we see a little bit more rotation in there? I'm not sure. Remember, Richard Newton opened the year as the starter, got banged up, and supposedly he's coming back this week. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. UCLA offense, a little up and down. In regards to just production, DTR, will he have a bounce back game this week? Only 82 yards passing last week. Zach Charbonnet went over 100 yards, but has gone now 2 consecutive games without scoring a touchdown. He's gone over 104 of 6, scored a touchdown in the first 4 games, but hasn't found the end zone in 2 consecutive games. Can he get things going this week in a tough matchup, I think, on the road at Washington? Louisiana Tech playing on the road at UTEP. Be careful with the UTEP running backs. It looked like Deion Hankins was reestablished as the running back one. Ronald Awatt got most of the carries and the run last week. Another situation I'm shying away from is the UTEP backfield right now. As long as they're splitting carries or rotting the hot hand, you're really taking a gamble if you're starting one of the UTEP running backs. Absolutely love Austin Kendall this week. The projections love Austin Kendall this week, and Austin Kendall more of a running threat than maybe I thought he would be at the beginning of the year. I think this is a big week for Austin Kendall, even on the road against that UTEP defense. Air Force playing on the road at Boise State. It'll be interesting to see how this matchup plays out. Boise State doesn't seem to be leaning on Khalil Shakir as much as they were earlier in the year. George Helene didn't play last game. I'm wondering if he's even going to be coming back for this matchup here. This is a game I think Air Force could play them tough. And when you look at Air Force, you talk about consistency. Let's look at running back Brad Roberts. Brad Roberts for Air Force has gone over 100 yards in 4 of 6 games. He's been over the 97-yard mark in 5 of 6. He has scored in 4 of the last 5 games, 2 of those multiple TD games. And when you look at his volume of carries, he's gone over 20 carries in 5 of 6 games. He's gone over 25 carries in 4 of 6 games. And I think this is a game where Hazik Daniels, Brad Roberts, they're going to have to carry the load offensively. And then, of course, they're going to kind of mix it up with Micah Davis in the backfield, out of the backfield. And so I do think that this is a good matchup. This is going to be a good game. And I do think that there's value here in fantasy, but I feel a little bit more clear cut. If I'm looking at Air Force right now, it's all about the running game and getting Brad Roberts in there. And over on the Boise State side, it's like, man, let's start Khalil Shakir, but I'm a little uncertain on who we lean with over there, even particularly in the Boise State backfield where, with Helene being gone last week, I didn't expect Habibi Lakio, Habibi Lakio to rush for 75 yards and a touchdown last week. Andrew Van Buren scored a touchdown on the ground and ran for 60 yards, but really, up until that point, Boise State hadn't done much on the ground. And even Habibi Lakio he never even had a 50-yard game up until last week. But the one thing that you have to do about Habibi Lakio, if George Helene is out, is that he got used as I thought the Boise State running backs, how I thought George Helene would get used at the beginning of the year. And that is not only just as a runner, but as a receiver out of the backfield. And I do think Habibi Lakio is an option that you have to consider this week, particularly if you play in PPR leagues, because if George Helene's out, I think that makes his stock go up for this matchup. You're talking about a guy, his season's high is only 75 rushing yards, but he has scored a touchdown on the ground in 2 of the last 4, and he has caught 5 passes in each of the last 2 games. And so those receptions, if he can give you 4 to 5 receptions, that's going to make up for the lack of yardage. And I think you've got to consider him in full PPR leagues this week. Getting back to the schedule, Arizona State playing at Utah. Be curious to see what happens at Utah on the ground. Look, 1 week it's Bernard, then it's Pleasure, then it looks like it's back to Tavion Thomas. Makes me a little bit nervous. I think one thing with Arizona State, we know what we're going to get. We're going to get Jaden Daniels making smart reads. We're going to get Rashad White, and we're going to get DeMonte Trayanum and that 1-2 punch. And I warned a lot of you guys last week, be careful with the Arizona State passing game. I know Ricky Pearsall had a big game a couple of weeks ago, but I just don't think there's enough consistency in that Arizona State passing game. It all lies in that Arizona State run game and what they possibly could do on the ground against Utah. But remember, Rashad White has scored a touchdown in every game this year, and I think he's a must start. You ride that wave until it no longer works. Hawaii playing on the road at Nevada. That's the latest game this week. Will Romeo Doubs play this week? He was suited up last week. Coaches felt it was wise to keep him out to rest him. I know he burned a lot of fantasy owners last week. I think this is still a good matchup for Turner on the Hawaii side. He's one of the top backs going into this matchup for us. And Carson Strong, you've got to expect another big game from him this week as well. And then I saved the TCU Oklahoma matchup for last because really that's, I have a thought on Caleb Williams and obviously Spencer Rattler. Any of you all that listened to the podcast last week and maybe just some, over the last, even some last year, there have been bits and pieces where I just have felt that Spencer Rattler wasn't the answer for Oklahoma at quarterback. I made reference on last week's podcast that I thought the play calling of I thought Lincoln Riley's play calling really dictated on what he had to work with Spencer Rattler. And I just didn't think that Spencer Rattler is really a great quarterback, particularly when it comes to making downfield reads and going through his progressions. I questioned that last week. Lo and behold, Caleb Williams comes in, throws for 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, comeback win against Texas, runs for 88 yards and a touchdown. And, when a coach says, hey man, maybe he's had a bad game, maybe he's had 2 bad games, but coaches usually come out and defend the starter. And they usually say, hey, listen, he's our guy. He's the starter. Make no mistakes about it. I mean, that's it. I mean, you kind of felt like Dan Mullen was like that a little bit with Emory Jones, right? You see it all the time. Coaches defend their quarterbacks whenever there seems to be some smoke or some whispers of some type of controversy. Well, we didn't get that this week. What we got was nothing. We got that Lincoln Riley's not going to make a call on quarterback. For me, that tells me one thing. I think we're going to see a change, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to see Caleb Williams at quarterback. And if we don't, I'm going to be really surprised if Spencer Rattler is the quarterback. I think this is the matchup you start Caleb Williams anyway. When you look at the schedule, they've got TCU. I said this last week. I thought Oklahoma could have easily have lost 3 games by now. And after last week's game, they could have easily have lost 4 games. All of a sudden now, you're getting into an Oklahoma schedule where you're wondering if they're surviving their losses now, because you've got TCU, Kansas, Texas Tech. And I think really what you're going to do is you've got to get Caleb Williams in the game now and get him playing TCU, Kansas, Texas Tech, and get his confidence ready, because you end the year with Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. And that's where the Oklahoma season is going to be won or lost. You've got 3 games to get Caleb Williams ready. We already know what we're getting from Spencer Rattler. You don't know yet the potential of Caleb Williams, but you see it. And much like we talked about with Anthony Richardson earlier in the year, maybe this one comes to fruition. Maybe this one comes true. But I think Caleb Williams should be the starter at Oklahoma. I think he's going to play well. I think Oklahoma is going to run the board over the next 3 weeks through TCU, Kansas, and Texas Tech. And it's going to come down to whether or not he can do anything against Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. And that's my take on Caleb Williams and the starting quarterback job at Oklahoma. And that's going to take us through week 7, guys. Look, that's it. A little bit of a condensed show. I say condensed show, but I've been here for nearly an hour, and that's going to do it. It's late Wednesday night. I'm going to get this uploaded into the website for some of you guys. I know you commute on Thursdays and like to listen to the podcast, maybe watch the show, give you that to digest on Thursday. Everything's up on the site already. This week's top 10, the weekly projections. Mike's got his DFS content from Thursday and Friday posted up there already. If you're not a member, it's never too late to come in, get some in-season content in regards to all the player projections, DFS write-ups. You even get the invite to the Discord as well, where there's over 700 members. There's just all kind of college fantasy football goodness and news bits, and a lot of guys that are active on that Discord to give you even their 2 cents on roster moves. Any type of DFS lineups, gambling, you name it, it is all there. We've got a channel for everyone. So get on in. It's not too late to get a membership to the CFF site. We're week 7 in. We've still got a long way to go. We're in the middle of the season. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be hitting the home stretch playoff season. It's right around the corner. You guys now putting yourselves in position in your leagues right now to make a run at the playoffs. So now it is moving time. And right now it's moving time for me because I'm getting out of the studio. It's week 7. I'm going to pull the curtain down on this show. I'll see you guys in week 8. Good luck, everyone. I'll see you then.